In the vast expanse of space, aboard the Galactic Council's premier research vessel, Admiral Raxthor couldn't contain his amusement as he examined the primitive Earth weapon through the quantum containment field. The ancient revolver, crafted sometime in the late 1800s according to human historical records, looked absurdly simple compared to the plasma rifles and neutron disruptors that lined the ship's armory. And you're telling me humans actually relied on these chemical propulsion devices for protection? He chittered to his science officer, his secondary breathing holes fluttering with barely suppressed laughter. The ornate wooden grip and weathered steel barrel seemed almost decorative rather than functional to his experienced eyes. Sarah Chin, the human cultural attaché assigned to the Galactic Council's Xenoarchaeology Division, maintained her professional composure despite the barely veiled condescension. After 5 years of working with various alien species, she'd grown used to their dismissive attitude toward Earth's technological history. That particular model was considered quite advanced for its time, Admiral. The precise engineering and reliability made it a favorite among Dash. Precise engineering? Raxthor interrupted, his crystalline eyes glinting with mirth. My dear Miss Chin, this device relies on controlled explosions to propel primitive metal projectiles. The margin for error alone would make any respectable weapons engineer shed their outer membrane in horror. The other alien officials gathered around the examination chamber joined in with their own sounds of amusement, from high-pitched trills to resonant hums. Sarah noticed Dr. Roberts, her fellow human researcher, clenching his jaw slightly. They'd both sat through countless demonstrations of their ancestors' achievements being ridiculed. Perhaps a practical demonstration would be more illuminating than technical specifications, Sarah suggested carefully. She'd been waiting for this moment ever since the artifact had been recovered from a private collection on Mars. With your permission, Admiral, we could set up a comparison test with modern armor materials. Raxthor's facial crystals shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of patronizing indulgence among his species. Very well. It might prove entertaining if nothing else. Though I must insist we follow full safety protocols. We wouldn't want anyone injured by this antique. Sarah nodded graciously while entering commands into her datapad. Within minutes, the ship's automated systems had assembled a series of standard-issue military armor plates at the far end of the testing chamber. Each plate represented the defensive technology of a different council species. The weapon has been thoroughly examined and restored to working condition, she explained, inputting the final safety protocols. The original ammunition was also preserved using temporal stasis technology. Dr. Roberts will handle the actual demonstration, given his expertise in historical weapons. Dr. Roberts stepped forward, his movements deliberate and confident as he accepted the revolver from the containment field. Sarah noticed how his fingers traced the worn surfaces with familiar reverence, a sentiment completely lost on their alien audience. I should note that this particular model was designed by one of Earth's most innovative weapons makers, he said, checking the cylinder with practiced ease. The balance of stopping power and precision was revolutionary for its time. Stopping power? One of the alien scientists scoffed. Against what? The primitive body armor of your era would hardly pose a challenge to any projectile. That's what makes this demonstration so interesting, Sarah interjected smoothly. We'll be testing it against modern materials. She gestured to the array of armor plates, including examples of current military-grade protection. The assembled aliens exchanged glances of amusement, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with barely contained mirth. Several pulled out personal scanning devices, eager to document what they assumed would be an amusing failure of primitive technology. Dr. Roberts took his position at the designated firing line, his posture shifting subtly as he raised the revolver. Sarah recognized the stance from her historical combat training, perfectly balanced, maximizing both stability and mobility. The aliens, however, continued their quiet mockery of the primitive shooting position. Beginning demonstration, Sarah announced formally. First target is standard-issue personal armor, current Galactic Council specifications. The chamber fell silent as Dr. Roberts squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of the revolver echoed off the reinforced walls, causing several aliens to flinch at the unexpected volume. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she observed their reaction to the weapons report, so different from the near-silent whine of energy weapons. But it was the impact on the armor plate that truly silenced the chamber. Where the aliens had expected minimal effect, the heavy lead bullet had punched through the advanced composite material with devastating efficiency. The plate, designed to disperse energy weapon impacts, had failed completely against the kinetic force of the revolver round. "Impossible," one of the alien scientists muttered, rushing forward to examine the damage. "The metallurgical composition of the projectile is far too simple to dash." "Second target," Sarah called out, interrupting the confused analysis. "Enhanced battle armor, Drachnid Empire specifications." Another shot rang out. Another plate showed a clean penetration. The aliens' amusement had vanished entirely, replaced by intense focus as they consulted their scanning devices and whispered among themselves. "You see," Sarah explained into the stunned silence, "human weapons development followed a very different path than most Council species. While energy weapons are undoubtedly more advanced in many ways, they also led to defenses specifically designed to counter them. But sometimes..." She paused, allowing Dr. Roberts to fire one more devastating shot. "Sometimes the simplest solution is also the most effective." Admiral Raxthor stepped forward, his crystalline features shifted to a deep purple of concern. "Most instructive, Miss Chen. Though I confess this human history has much to teach us, not just about technological development, but about the danger of underestimating seemingly primitive solutions." As the aliens huddled around their scanning devices, frantically discussing implications and potential countermeasures, Sarah caught Dr. Roberts' subtle wink. They'd achieved exactly what they'd hoped, forcing the Council to recognize that human ingenuity, even in its earlier forms, deserved serious consideration. But Sarah's satisfaction was tempered by a nagging concern. The revolver was just one example from humanity's vast arsenal of primitive weapons. How would the Council react when they discovered that humans had developed far more devastating applications of simple physical principles? As she watched the aliens' growing agitation, she wondered if perhaps they'd opened a door that some would prefer had remained closed. The ancient revolver, now returned to its containment field, seemed to gleam with newfound menace under the chamber's lights. Its simple elegance stood as a testament to human innovation, and a warning to those who would dismiss humanity's potential based on technological appearances alone. The question now was, how would the Galactic Council adapt to this revelation? And more importantly, what other surprises did humanity's primitive past hold? The following days aboard the research vessel were marked by a palpable shift in atmosphere. Where alien scientists had once moved through the halls with casual confidence, they now walked with wary glances at the human contingent. Sarah noticed how conversations would halt when she entered a room, only to resume in hushed tones after she passed. The demonstration had achieved its goal, perhaps too well. "They're running simulations again," Dr. Roberts commented during their private lunch meeting in the ship's observation deck. Through the transparent walls, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the backdrop of space. "Third time this week. Testing every known armor configuration against kinetic weapons." Sarah stirred her synthetic coffee thoughtfully. "And what have they found?" "That's the interesting part. They're discovering that nearly all their defensive technologies were developed with energy weapons in mind. The basic physics of a high-velocity projectile." He paused, grinning. "Well, let's just say they're having to rethink some fundamental assumptions." "Admiral Raxthor has requested access to our historical weapons archives," Sarah added, keeping her voice low despite their privacy settings. "Particularly interested in something called the Paris gun, from your old research papers." Roberts nearly choked on his sandwich. They're not ready for that. The psychological impact of the revolver demonstration was significant enough. If they realize humans were launching projectiles over 40 kilometers high in 1918. "That's exactly why we need to handle this carefully," Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. "The Council's been dismissive of human military history for too long. But if we shock them too badly, it could trigger a defensive response we don't want." The observation deck's lighting shifted subtly, indicating the change to ship's evening cycle. The Earth below was now catching the first rays of sunrise, its atmosphere glowing like molten gold. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Roberts asked suddenly. "Showing them our capabilities, even historical ones?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching her homeworld turn beneath them. "I think about it every day. But remember why we started this project? After the Centauri incident?" Roberts nodded grimly. They both remembered the disaster that had prompted their current mission. A simple misunderstanding between human colonists and a Drachnid survey team had nearly escalated into open conflict. The aliens, confident in their technological superiority, had threatened military action. They hadn't expected the colonists to have access to obsolete ballistic weapons, or to know how to use them effectively. "We need them to understand us," Sarah continued. Not just our current technology but our history. How we think. How we solve problems. The revolver demonstration wasn't just about the weapon. It was about showing them that humanity has always found ways to overcome superior force through innovation. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert on Sarah's datapad. Her eyes widened slightly as she read the message. Well, this is interesting. The Council's requesting an emergency session. Apparently, some of the younger species are expressing concern about having humans aboard their vessels. Predictable, Roberts snorted. Give me some credit, Sarah. I deliberately chose that revolver model for its historical significance, not its penetration capability. If I'd brought out a Colt Walker. Let's not give them any more ideas just yet, Sarah cut him off with a wry smile. We need to focus on damage control now. The Council's scientific division is split. Half of them want to classify all pre-atomic human weapons technology as restricted knowledge. Roberts laughed out loud at that, drawing curious looks from a passing group of alien researchers. They do realize these designs are freely available in museums across Earth, right? Not to mention the historical records, engineering manuals? That's not the point, Sarah replied. They're not really trying to restrict the information, they're trying to save face. The Council's built its reputation on being the most technologically advanced governing body in known space. Finding out that their latest armor designs can be defeated by weapons from humanity's 19th century. She left the implication hanging. The ship's evening cycle was in full effect now, the observation decks lighting dim to simulate dusk. Earth had vanished behind them as the vessel continued its orbit, replaced by the stark beauty of the lunar surface below. So what's our next move? Roberts asked, his voice taking on the quiet intensity Sarah recognized from their academy days. We can't put this genie back in the bottle, and honestly, I don't think we should try. Sarah's response was interrupted by another alert, this one accompanied by the ship's general announcement system. Attention all personnel. Due to ongoing security protocol revisions, access to the artifact examination chamber is temporarily restricted. All research staff are required to attend an emergency briefing in the main auditorium at 0800 hours ship time. Well, Sarah said with a slight smile, I guess that answers your question. They're calling a full briefing, something they've only done twice since this mission began. We've definitely got their attention. Roberts began gathering their lunch containers, his movements deliberate and unhurried despite the announcement's urgent tone. You know what really worries them, don't you? It's not just the weapons themselves. Sarah nodded. It's the implications. If human weapons from over 2 centuries ago can defeat their current armor. She let the thought hang unfinished. Exactly. They're wondering what other, primitive human innovations might be more effective than they assumed. And more importantly, Roberts lowered his voice further, though they were now alone on the observation deck. They're wondering what modern humans might be capable of that they haven't revealed. As they made their way back to their quarters, Sarah couldn't help but notice the increased security presence in the corridors. The Council's swift reaction to the demonstration suggested deeper concerns than mere technological superiority. Perhaps they were finally beginning to understand something that humans had learned through centuries of warfare. True strength lay not in the sophistication of one's weapons, but in the ingenuity to use whatever tools were available. The next morning's briefing would be crucial. Sarah spent hours preparing her presentation, carefully selecting historical examples that would educate without alarming their alien colleagues further. The challenge was finding the right balance, demonstrating humanity's capabilities while emphasizing their commitment to peaceful cooperation. But as she reviewed her notes that evening, a message from Earth Command added another layer of complexity to her task. The subject line alone made her stomach tighten. Historical weapons demonstration, unexpected diplomatic implications. Sarah glanced at the temporal display, still 6 hours until the briefing. 6 hours to figure out how to prevent a diplomatic incident from becoming a crisis. 6 hours to convince the Council that humanity's primitive ingenuity was a resource to be valued, not a threat to be contained. As she settled in for a long night of preparation, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. A single ancient revolver had accomplished what years of diplomatic missions had failed to do. It had made the Galactic Council take humanity seriously. The question now was, what would they do with that newfound respect? The ship's night cycle hummed quietly around her as she worked, Earth's distant silhouette occasionally visible through her viewport. Somewhere in the vast array of stars beyond, other human vessels were going about their business, carrying with them centuries of innovation that the Council was only beginning to understand. Sarah wondered how many other primitive surprises her species held, waiting to reshape the galaxy's understanding of human potential. The answer, she suspected, would prove far more revolutionary than any ancient weapon could ever be. The morning of the briefing arrived with an unusual level of activity throughout the ship. Alien scientists hurried through the corridors, their various appendages clutching datapads and analysis devices. Security personnel were posted at key intersections, their presence more visible than ever before. Sarah met Dr. Roberts outside the main auditorium, both of them dressed in formal Earth diplomatic attire. The simple blue uniforms stood out among the elaborate biosuits and ceremonial coverings of their alien colleagues. "Ready for this?" Roberts asked quietly as they waited to enter. Sarah adjusted her collar, a nervous habit from her academy days. "As ready as I'll ever be. Did you see the latest analysis from the weapons lab? About the metallurgical composition?" "Yes." Roberts shook his head in amazement. "They're fascinated by the primitive manufacturing techniques. Apparently, the inconsistencies in the hand-forged metal actually contribute to its effectiveness against their armor." The auditorium doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a chamber filled with nearly every senior researcher and official aboard the vessel. Admiral Raxthor occupied the central podium, his crystalline features set in what Sarah had learned to recognize as an expression of serious concern. "Representatives of Earth," the Admiral began as they took their seats, "recent events have raised significant questions about our understanding of human technological development. This briefing will address those concerns and establish new protocols for the examination of Earth artifacts." Sarah noticed several security officers positioning themselves near the exits. Not overtly threatening, but their presence sent a clear message. The Council was taking no chances. "However," Raxthor continued, his voice carrying a note of authority that silenced the murmuring crowd, "before we proceed, we have received a most unusual request from the Council's Historical Analysis Division." Sarah and Roberts exchanged glances. This wasn't part of the scheduled briefing. "It seems," the Admiral's crystals shifted to a shade of deep blue, "that they wish to establish a new research initiative. One focused specifically on studying the development of human problem-solving methodologies throughout your species' history." The announcement sent a wave of surprised chittering through the alien audience. Sarah sat up straighter, her diplomatic training kicking in as she analyzed the implications. This could be either an opportunity or a trap. "The Council has observed," Raxthor continued, "that humans have consistently found innovative solutions to technological challenges, often through means that our species would consider unconventional. The recent weapons demonstration has prompted a re-evaluation of this tendency." Sarah could feel the tension in the room shifting. The initial fear and suspicion were being replaced by something else, curiosity, perhaps even reluctant admiration. "Therefore," the Admiral's crystals brightened slightly, "we propose expanding the scope of our Xenoarchaeology division to include a comprehensive study of human innovation throughout your pre-space history. With appropriate security measures, of course." The implications of this announcement weren't lost on anyone present. The Council wasn't just acknowledging human capabilities, they were actively seeking to understand them. It was an unprecedented shift in their typically dismissive attitude toward lesser species. As the briefing continued, Sarah made careful notes on her datapad. The Council's proposed research initiative would open doors that had been firmly closed to human representatives for decades. But it would also put humanity under intense scrutiny. Every historical innovation, every primitive solution would be analyzed and catalogued. The question was, were they ready for what they might find? The revolver demonstration had been carefully chosen and controlled. But human history was filled with innovations that might prove far more unsettling to their alien colleagues. As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Roberts leaned over and whispered, "They have no idea what they're getting into, do they?" Sarah watched Admiral Raxthor outlining the new security protocols, his crystalline features shifting through shades of blue and purple as he spoke. "No," she whispered back, "but they're finally asking the right questions." And that, she realized, was both the greatest achievement and the biggest challenge they now faced. The Council's curiosity had been awakened, but directing it safely would require all their diplomatic skill. The briefing concluded with the establishment of new research teams and security protocols. As the audience filed out, Sarah noticed small groups of alien scientists already forming, their discussions animated despite the early hour. "Miss Chin," Admiral Raxthor called out as she reached the door. "A moment of your time, please." Sarah nodded to Dr. Roberts to go ahead without her and turned back to face the Admiral. His crystalline features had shifted to a deep violet, a color she'd never seen him display before. "I must admit," he began once they were alone, "that your demonstration has prompted considerable discussion among council leadership. Some are calling for increased restrictions on human technology sharing. Others advocate for deeper integration of human expertise into our research programs." "And what is your position, Admiral?" Sarah asked carefully. Raxthor's crystals shimmed slightly. What Sarah had learned was his species' equivalent of a thoughtful sigh. "I find myself in an unusual position, Miss Chen. For the first time in my career, I am uncertain about the technological superiority we have long taken for granted." Sarah waited patiently as the Admiral gathered his thoughts. "Your primitive weapon demonstrated more than just an effective means of defeating our armor," he continued. "It showed us that we have become complacent in our assumptions. This is not a comfortable realization for species who pride themselves on their advanced technology. Understanding different approaches to problem-solving can only benefit the Council," Sarah offered diplomatically. "Human history is full of examples where simple solutions proved more effective than complex ones." "Yes," Raxthor's crystals pulsed briefly. "That is precisely what concerns many of my colleagues. If human simple solutions can overcome our most advanced defenses." He left the thought unfinished. Sarah recognized the delicate moment for what it was. The Council's fear could either drive them toward greater cooperation with humanity or push them toward increased isolation and suspicion. "Admiral," she said carefully, "human history also teaches us that technological advantages are temporary. What matters more is the willingness to learn from each other." The revolver demonstration wasn't meant to threaten or intimidate, it was meant to open a dialogue. Raxthor's crystals shifted to a lighter shade, indicating either acceptance or resignation. Sarah wasn't quite sure which. Perhaps that is why the Historical Analysis Division is so eager to study human innovation. They believe understanding your species' approach to problem-solving could benefit all Council races. "And what do you believe, Admiral?" The alien leader was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline features refracting the auditorium's light in complex patterns. "I believe, Miss Chen, that we have much to learn from each other. But I also believe we must proceed with great care. Not all species are prepared to have their fundamental assumptions challenged so dramatically." As Sarah left the auditorium, she couldn't help but feel that a critical threshold had been crossed. The Council's interest in human innovation could open new doors for cooperation, or it could lead to increased scrutiny and suspicion. Everything would depend on how they handled the next few phases of their research. She found Dr. Roberts waiting in their shared office, already reviewing data from the morning's briefing. "So," he looked up as she entered, "what did our crystalline friend have to say?" "They're scared," Sarah replied, sinking into her chair. "Not just of our weapons but of what else they might have overlooked. The Council's built its entire power structure on technological superiority. Now they're wondering what other primitive surprises we might be hiding." "Can't blame them," Roberts mused. "If a 19th century revolver can punch through their best armor." He let the implication hang in the air. Sarah pulled up her secure communication channel, noting several priority messages from Earth Command. "We need to be careful with the next phase. The Council's approved the research initiative, but they'll be watching every move we make." Speaking of which, Roberts activated their privacy field, the air around their desk shimming slightly as sound-dampening technology engaged. "Earth Command has approved our request to access the pre-atomic weapons archive. They want us to prepare a comprehensive presentation on human military innovation throughout history." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "All of it? Including the classified sections?" "Everything except the restricted files," Roberts confirmed. "They want the Council to understand that humanity's primitive solutions aren't limited to kinetic weapons." "That's going to cause quite a stir," Sarah said carefully. "Especially when they learn about some of our more creative innovations." Roberts grinned. "Wait until they find out about the bat bombs." "Let's maybe save that particular example for later," Sarah suggested, though she couldn't help smiling. "We need to focus on innovations that demonstrate problem-solving ability without causing panic." "Fair enough," Roberts agreed, pulling up their research database. "Where should we start?" Sarah thought for a moment, considering the delicate balance they needed to maintain. "Let's begin with something they'll understand, the evolution of human defensive technologies. Show them how we adapted to overcome superior forces throughout history." As they began compiling their presentation, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a crucial turning point in human-alien relations. The Council's reaction to their next revelations would shape diplomatic relations for decades to come. But perhaps that was exactly what humanity needed, a chance to show that their worth lay not in the sophistication of their technology, but in their ability to innovate and adapt. The ancient revolver had opened the door. Now it was time to show the galaxy what else humanity's primitive ingenuity had produced. The question was, would the Council be ready for what they discovered? 3 weeks after the revolver demonstration, the mood aboard the research vessel had shifted from tense curiosity to barely contained alarm. Sarah stood in the main conference room, surrounded by holographic displays showing centuries of human military innovation. The images cycled through everything from ancient siege engines to World War II experimental weapons. Each revelation seemed to increase the alien scientists' agitation. "And you're telling us," senior researcher Vectral's tentacles rippled with agitation, "that humans developed all these different approaches to warfare without access to quantum mechanics or plasma technology?" "Necessity breeds innovation," Sarah replied carefully, watching Admiral Raxthor's crystalline features shift through various shades of concern. "Humans have always excelled at finding unconventional solutions to military challenges." Dr. Roberts stepped forward, gesturing to a particular hologram showing the interior mechanisms of a primitive firearm. "Take this design for instance. When faced with superior forces, human engineers didn't try to match their opponent's technology directly. Instead, they found ways to exploit fundamental physical principles that their enemies had overlooked." The room erupted in chittering whispers as the alien scientists processed this information. Sarah noticed several security officers shifting uncomfortably near the doors, their weapon hands twitching slightly. "Admiral," she said, addressing Raxthor directly, "I understand these revelations are concerning. But remember, we're sharing this history precisely because we want to prevent misunderstandings. The more the Council understands about human innovation, the less likely we are to have accidents like the Centauri incident." Before the Admiral could respond, the ship's emergency alert system activated with a shrill tone. Red warning lights began pulsing along the corridors outside. "Multiple unidentified vessels detected on approach vector," the ship's AI announced calmly. "Energy signatures match known Drachnid configurations, but transponder codes are not responding to recognition protocols." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Drachnids, the same species whose survey team had nearly started a war with human colonists. And now they were approaching a research vessel containing detailed information about human military capabilities. "Admiral," she said urgently, "we need to secure the weapons research data immediately. If that information falls into the wrong hands dash." A violent shudder ran through the ship, cutting off her words. The lights flickered momentarily as emergency shields engaged. "Enemy vessels have opened fire," the AI reported. "Direct hits recorded on decks 3 through 7. Shield integrity at 87% and falling." Admiral Raxthor's crystals had shifted to a deep red, a color Sarah had never seen before. "Battle stations," he commanded. "All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. Security teams to defensive positions." As chaos erupted around them, Sarah caught Dr. Roberts' eye. They both knew what the Drachnids must be after. The weapons demonstration had been recorded and transmitted to the Council's central database. If even a fraction of that information leaked... "Admiral," Sarah stepped closer to Raxthor, keeping her voice low and urgent. "Those ships aren't here by accident. They must have intercepted the weapons research data transmission. If they're hoping to find weakness in Council defense systems dash." Another impact rocked the vessel. The holographic displays flickered and died, leaving the room in the dim glow of emergency lighting. "Shield integrity at 60%, the AI updated. Enemy vessels are attempting to establish a boarding corridor. Our weapons appear to be having minimal effect on their enhanced shielding." Sarah's mind raced. The Drachnids had clearly upgraded their defenses based on the leaked data about human weapons. They'd adapted to counter energy-based attacks, just as the Council had begun doing after the revolver demonstration. But that adaptation might be exactly what they needed. "Admiral," she said, a plan forming in her mind. "I need access to the artifact storage vault. Immediately." Raxthor's crystals pulsed with uncertainty. "Miss Chin, this is hardly the time for dash." "Trust me," she cut him off, something she'd never dared do before. "The Drachnids have modified their shields to resist energy weapons. They're expecting us to fight according to Council tactical doctrine. But we have something they haven't accounted for." Understanding dawned in the Admiral's crystalline features. "The primitive weapons," he said softly. "They've optimized their defenses against energy-based attacks, while leaving themselves vulnerable to simpler methods," Roberts finished. just like your armor did against the revolver. Another impact shook the ship. Shield integrity at 40%, the AI announced. Multiple boarding craft detected on approach vectors. Admiral Raxthor's crystals shifted rapidly through several colors before settling on a determined blue. Security Chief, he barked, escort Miss Chen and Dr. Roberts to the artifact vault. Authorization code RAX 7 Prime. Full access granted. As they hurried through the corridors, following the heavily armed security detail, Sarah's mind was already racing through the possibilities. The revolver had been just one example of human ingenuity. The vault contained dozens of other primitive weapons, each one representing a different approach to solving the fundamental problems of warfare. The Drachnids had prepared themselves for an advanced technological battle. They were about to learn, just as the Council had, that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective. The vault door loomed before them, its quantum-locked seals glowing softly in the emergency lighting. As the security chief input the override codes, Sarah could feel the ship shuddering under continued assault. Warning, the AI's voice echoed through the corridors. Hull breach detected on Deck 5. Enemy boarding parties have breached containment. Security teams engaging in sectors 7 through 12. The vault door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing rows of carefully preserved artifacts from humanity's military history. Each one represented a different lesson in innovation, a different approach to overcoming superior forces. And somewhere in this collection of primitive weapons lay their best hope of survival. Sarah just prayed they'd have time to find it before the Drachnids reached them. Shield integrity at 20%, the AI updated emotionlessly. Estimated time to total failure, 8 minutes. Sarah stepped into the vault, her eyes scanning the collection of humanity's deadliest innovations. They had 8 minutes to prove once again that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. The fate of every person aboard, human and alien alike, now depended on finding the right primitive weapon to counter the Drachnids' advanced technology. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her as she began examining the artifacts, looking for something that might save them all. The question was, which piece of humanity's primitive past would write the next chapter of their future? Sarah's hands moved swiftly over the artifact containment units, her mind racing through possibilities as the ship shuddered around them. The revolver had proven effective against Council armor, but the Drachnids would have adapted their defenses based on that demonstration. They needed something different, something unexpected. Warning, the AI's voice remained eerily calm. Shield integrity at 15%. Multiple hull breaches detected on decks 3 through 6. Security teams falling back to defensive positions. Dr. Roberts was examining another section of the vault, his movements quick but methodical. Sarah, he called out suddenly, his voice tight with urgency. Remember that discussion we had about the Paris gun? Before she could respond, a new alarm tone cut through the chaos, this one deeper, more ominous than the others. Admiral Raxthor's voice came over the ship-wide communication system, his usual crystalline tones distorted by stress. All personnel, priority alert. Enemy boarding parties have breached the main computer core. They're attempting to download the complete weapons research database. Sarah felt her blood run cold. The database contained not just information about the revolver demonstration, but detailed analysis of hundreds of human weapons throughout history. In the wrong hands, that knowledge could destabilize the entire sector. But something about the situation wasn't adding up. She turned to the security chief, whose multiple eyes were scanning various tactical displays. The Drachnids went straight for the computer core, she said. How did they know exactly where to find it? The chief's outer membrane rippled, his species equivalent of a frown. Ships of this class all follow standard Council design protocols. The computer core's location is not in the public documentation, Sarah finished. I checked when we first came aboard. That information is classified under Council security protocols. A heavy silence fell over the vault, broken only by the distant sounds of weapons fire and the ship's continuing alerts. Shield integrity at 10%, the AI updated. Enemy forces advancing on decks 2 and 4. Security teams requesting reinforcement. Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think we have another problem besides the Drachnids? Before Sarah could respond, her personal communication device activated with a priority override signal. The small holographic display showed a face she hadn't expected to see: Director Chen of Earth Intelligence Division. Sarah, the director's image spoke quickly, the transmission occasionally distorting under interference. We've detected unauthorized access to the Council's weapons research network. Someone aboard your vessel has been transmitting classified data for the past 3 weeks. The pieces suddenly fell into place. The Drachnid attack isn't random, Sarah said, her mind racing ahead of her words. They're here because someone told them exactly what to look for and where to find it. Correct, the director confirmed. We have reason to believe a high-ranking council official has been feeding information to radical elements within the Drachnid Empire. They're not just after your research data, they're after the artifacts themselves. Another explosion rocked the ship, this one closer than the others. The vault's reinforced doors trembled under the impact. Shield integrity at 5%, the AI announced. Warning, unauthorized access detected in primary weapons control. All defensive systems have been locked out. The security chief's communicator crackled with urgent reports from his teams. The Drachnids were advancing faster than should have been possible, as if they knew exactly which corridors to take and which defenses to avoid. Director, Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady, what else do we need to know? The council official we suspect, they're not just after military technology. According to our intelligence, they believe humans have discovered something far more significant. Something about the fundamental nature of warfare itself. Roberts looked up from the artifact he was examining, his expression grave. The innovation protocols, he said. They don't want our weapons, they want to understand how we think. The director's image nodded. Precisely. The Drachnids have some of the most advanced technology in known space, but they've become dependent on it. Your revolver demonstration showed them that humans can find effective solutions with minimal resources. They want that capability. And someone on the council is helping them get it, Sarah finished. She looked around the vault, seeing the artifacts in a new light. Each one represented not just a weapon, but a way of thinking, of solving problems that most advanced species had forgotten. Another explosion shook the vault, closer this time. Warning lights flashed as the reinforced doors began to show signs of stress. Shield failure imminent, the AI reported. Emergency containment protocols engaging on all decks. The security chief's outer membrane had turned a pale shade of alarm. We have multiple teams reporting enemy forces converging on our position. They're using some kind of advanced breaching technology we've never seen before. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Drachnids had clearly been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They had inside help, advanced technology, and detailed knowledge of the ship's layout. By all logical measures, the situation was hopeless. But then again, humanity had faced hopeless situations before. It was what had driven them to create many of the innovations stored in this very vault. Dr. Roberts, she said, moving toward a specific containment unit, remember what you said about the Paris gun? About how it represented human ability to think beyond conventional limitations. He nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. You're not suggesting. I'm suggesting we show them exactly why human innovation is so dangerous. She turned to the security chief. How many of your people have combat training with projectile weapons? The chief's membrane rippled with confusion. None. Council forces are only trained in energy weapon protocols. Perfect, Sarah said, her fingers flying over the containment unit's controls. Because what I'm about to propose goes against every tactical doctrine in the Council's database. Director Chen's holographic image flickered as another explosion rocked the ship. Whatever you're planning, Sarah, do it fast. Our sensors show the Drachnids are preparing to deploy some kind of large-scale energy weapon. If they breach the vault's defenses. The vault doors groaned under another impact, their quantum-reinforced structure beginning to fail. They had minutes, maybe less, before the Drachnids broke through. But as Sarah looked at the assembled artifacts, each one a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds, she felt a strange sense of calm. The Drachnids had advanced technology, inside information, and superior numbers. What they didn't have was the one thing that had driven human innovation throughout history: the ability to think beyond conventional limitations when faced with impossible odds. Director, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, I need you to transmit everything we have on Operation Crossbow to the ship's secure database. Authorization code Chin Alpha 9. The director's eyes widened slightly. Sarah, that's highly classified historical data. The council doesn't even know we dash. Exactly, she cut him off. They don't know, the Drachnids don't know, and whoever's helping them doesn't know. And that's why it's going to work. The vault doors buckled inward slightly as another explosion hit them. Warning lights flashed across all the containment units as the ship's power systems began to fail. Final shield failure in progress, the AI announced. All personnel prepare for emergency protocols. Sarah looked at the assembled faces, human and alien alike, and took a deep breath. They were about to show the galaxy why underestimating primitive human innovation was the last mistake many advanced civilizations had made. The only question was, would they survive long enough to deliver the lesson? The vault's reinforced doors gave one final groan before buckling inward with a deafening crash. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the room as Sarah finished inputting the final commands into her datapad. The classified files from Operation Crossbow were still downloading. They needed just a few more minutes. Multiple hostile forces breaching Deck 1, the AI announced. All security barriers have been compromised. Dr. Roberts stood beside her, his hands steady as he assembled something that would have looked primitive to their alien colleagues, if any of them had recognized what it was. The security chief's outer membrane had shifted to a color that Sarah hadn't seen before, somewhere between anxiety and desperate hope. "Whatever you're planning," the chief said, "it needs to happen now. The Drachnids have deployed some kind of energy dampening field. Our weapons are losing power." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying over the ancient mechanical devices they'd retrieved from the vault. "That's exactly what we were counting on. They've adapted their technology to counter everything they think we might try." The sound of weapons fire grew closer. Through the ruined vault doors, they could see flashes of energy weapons lighting up the corridor. The security teams were falling back, their advanced rifles becoming little more than decorative clubs as the dampening field intensified. "Download complete," her datapad chimed. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she reviewed the schematics from Operation Crossbow. Sometimes the oldest tricks were the most effective. "Dr. Roberts," she called out, "are we ready?" He held up what looked like a crude projectile launcher, assembled from parts of various historical weapons they'd found in the vault. "Ready. Though I still think this is insane." "Insanity is a matter of perspective," Sarah replied, checking the mechanical timing mechanism one final time. "The Drachnids are expecting us to fight back with technology. They've prepared for energy weapons, plasma rifles, even basic ballistic weapons like the revolver." The security chief's membrane rippled with confusion as he watched them work. "But what you're assembling, it's not even a weapon. It's just pieces," Sarah finished. "Exactly. Because sometimes the most effective solution isn't a better weapon, it's understanding how to use what you have in ways your enemy won't expect." A massive explosion rocked the ship, sending them all staggering. Through the smoke and debris, they could see the first Drachnid boarding party approaching, massive reptiloid figures encased in gleaming armor that seemed to absorb the emergency lighting. "All defensive systems offline," the AI reported calmly. "Hull integrity compromised on multiple decks. Evacuation protocols initiated." The lead Drachnid stepped forward, its biomechanical armor humming with barely contained energy. "Surrender the artifacts and the research data," it demanded in heavily accented common. "Resist and we will take them by force." Sarah stepped forward, keeping her hands visible. "I assume you're looking for this?" She held up her datapad, its screen still displaying the classified files. "Everything the Council knows about human weapons development, including some theories about why our primitive technology can be so effective." The Drachnid's armored head tilted slightly. "You understand nothing. We don't just want your weapons, we want to understand how your species thinks. How you consistently find ways to overcome superior technology with minimal resources." "Oh, we understand perfectly," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "That's why we're about to give you a demonstration." She nodded to Dr. Roberts, who had been quietly adjusting something behind her. The Drachnid's sensors must have registered the movement because their weapons immediately tracked toward him. "That primitive projectile launcher will be useless," the lead Drachnid stated. "Our armor is designed to dash." "It's not a weapon," Sarah interrupted. "It's a delivery system." Before the Drachnids could react, Roberts activated the launcher. But instead of firing a projectile, it released a cloud of what appeared to be simple metal shavings into the air. The Drachnids actually laughed, a harsh, grating sound through their armor speakers. "Metal dust," their leader scoffed. "Your primitive tactics are even more pathetic than we dash." The rest of its sentence was cut off as Sarah activated the device in her hand. The mechanical timing mechanism, built from parts of an ancient clock, triggered a series of electromagnetic pulses crude by modern standards, but devastatingly effective against the Drachnid's over-engineered armor. The metal shavings, carefully chosen from specific artifacts in the vault, conducted the pulses in ways that no advanced sensor could have predicted. The Drachnid's armor, designed to resist energy weapons and ballistic impacts, had no defense against this improvised attack. Systems began failing across their suits. Joints locked up as control circuits overloaded. Communication devices sparked and died. The dampening field they deployed, focused on negating advanced energy weapons, did nothing to stop this primitive but ingenious solution. Impossible, the lead Drachnid struggled to move in its now rigid armor. Our systems are completely independent. No simple electromagnetic pulse could dash. That's the problem with relying too heavily on advanced technology, Sarah said, watching as the boarding party collapsed under the weight of their own paralyzed armor. You forget that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. The security chief's membrane had shifted to a color she recognized as amazement. The metal dust. It created a conductive network that carried the pulse directly into their systems. But how did you know it would work? Operation Crossbow, Dr. Roberts explained, already preparing another batch of the conductive powder. During Earth's Second World War, our ancestors discovered that simple strips of aluminum could disrupt even the most advanced radar systems of the time. We just adapted the principle. Sarah's datapad chimed with an urgent alert. More Drachnid forces were converging on their position, but now they had a weapon they wouldn't expect. Sometimes the best innovations came from looking backward rather than forward. Security teams moving to contain disabled enemy forces, the AI reported. Drachnid vessels attempting emergency withdrawal from combat zone. But Sarah barely heard the announcement. Her attention was fixed on something she'd noticed in the lead Drachnid's armor, a small symbol that shouldn't have been there. A symbol she'd seen before in classified council archives. Dr. Roberts, she called out quietly. Take a look at this. He moved closer, examining the mark she'd pointed out. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized its significance. The symbol wasn't Drachnid at all. It was an ancient human military insignia, one that hadn't been used in over a century. But its presence on advanced alien armor could mean only one thing. Somewhere out there, humanity had been sharing more than just old weapons designs. As the security teams moved in to secure the disabled Drachnids, Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with Roberts. They'd won this battle using humanity's primitive ingenuity. But the discovery of that symbol suggested a much larger conflict was just beginning. Sometimes the most dangerous innovations weren't weapons at all, they were ideas. And ideas, once shared, had a way of evolving beyond anyone's control. The question now wasn't just who had been helping the Drachnids, but what other pieces of humanity's past might be waiting to reshape the galaxy's future. Admiral Raxthor's voice came over the ship's communication system, announcing that the immediate crisis was over. But Sarah barely heard him. Her mind was already racing ahead, considering the implications of what they'd discovered. The Council had laughed at humanity's primitive weapons. They'd dismissed centuries of innovation as crude and simplistic. But now they were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology at all. It was in their ability to think beyond conventional limitations. And somewhere out there, someone already understood that truth well enough to turn it against them. 2 weeks after the Drachnid attack, Sarah stood at the observation deck of the Council's central station, watching ships come and go through the massive space dock. The research vessel had been repaired, its hull showing no signs of the battle that had nearly torn it apart. But the changes that battle had triggered were still reverberating throughout Council space. The Security Council approved our recommendation, Dr. Roberts said, joining her at the viewport. They're establishing a new division dedicated to studying alternative approaches to technological development. No more dismissing solutions just because they seem primitive. Sarah nodded, her eyes tracking a sleek transport ship as it navigated through the dock's energy fields. And the Drachnids? Still maintaining it was a rogue faction acting without official authorization. Though our intelligence suggests their military is undergoing some significant reorganization. Apparently, being defeated by primitive human innovation was quite a shock to their command structure. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the station's traffic. The Council's massive headquarters complex stretched out below them, its crystalline towers reflecting the light of distant stars. In one of those towers, Admiral Raxthor was probably still explaining to his superiors how a handful of humans had managed to overcome advanced Drachnid armor using little more than metal dust and clockwork. They found something interesting in the disabled Drachnid armor, Sarah said finally. Besides the human military insignia. Traces of engineering principles that weren't supposed to exist yet. Theoretical designs that Earth's research teams are only now beginning to explore. Roberts turned to face her, his expression serious. You think someone's been sharing more than just historical data? I think, Sarah chose her words carefully, that we're not the only ones who understand the value of looking backward to move forward. That insignia, it wasn't just any military mark. It belonged to a specific research division that was officially dissolved over a century ago. Project Prometheus, Robert said quietly. The division responsible for some of humanity's most innovative weapons development. Sarah nodded. A division that supposedly destroyed all its research when it was shut down. But what if they didn't? What if some of those innovations found their way into unexpected hands? Before Roberts could respond, their datapads chimed simultaneously with a priority alert. Director Chen's face appeared in their shared holographic display. We've completed the analysis of the captured Drachnid data cores, the director said without preamble. You're going to want to see this. The hologram shifted, showing a series of technical schematics that made Sarah's breath catch. The designs incorporated principles from dozens of primitive human weapons, but evolved in ways that should have been impossible. Someone had taken humanity's historical innovations and pushed them far beyond their original limitations. These aren't just adaptations, Roberts muttered, studying the designs. They're evolutionary leaps. Whoever did this understood not just how our weapons worked, but why we designed them the way we did. Exactly, the director confirmed. And we found something else. Communications logs suggesting that whoever helped the Drachnids isn't working alone. They're part of a larger network, one that's been studying and adapting human innovation for decades. Sarah turned back to the viewport, watching as a massive council warship maneuvered through the docking procedures. Its advanced energy weapons and quantum shields represented the pinnacle of alien technology. But as she'd learned, sometimes the most effective solutions came from much simpler origins. So what do we do now? Roberts asked. We keep teaching, Sarah replied, her decision already made. We show the council why human innovation matters, not just our weapons but our way of thinking. Because somewhere out there, someone is already using that knowledge. And we need to make sure it's understood properly. The director's hologram nodded approvingly. The council has authorized an expanded research program. They want to understand everything, not just our military history, but all aspects of human problem-solving and innovation. They're finally asking the right questions, Sarah said, watching as another ship disappeared into the depths of space. Though I suspect they may not be entirely comfortable with all the answers. As if to emphasize her point, a priority message flashed across their datapads, a request for consultation from the Council's Advanced Warfare Division. They wanted to understand how humans had historically dealt with technological disparities in combat situations. You know what the real irony is? Roberts mused as they prepared to leave the observation deck. All of this started because they laughed at a simple revolver. Now they're scrambling to understand centuries of human innovation. Sarah smiled, remembering the moment that had started it all. Sometimes the best lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Even if those teachers are considered primitive by those who should know better. As they walked through the station's corridors, passing aliens of various species hurrying about their business, Sarah couldn't help but feel that they were standing at the beginning of something much larger than a simple cultural exchange. The council had finally recognized that true innovation wasn't about having the most advanced technology, it was about understanding how to use whatever tools were available in ways that no one else had considered. The ancient revolver that had started this journey now sat in a position of honor in the council's main museum, a reminder that dismissing any technology as primitive was a dangerous assumption. But Sarah knew it represented something far more important. The moment when the galaxy's most advanced civilizations learned that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most profound. And somewhere out there, someone who already understood that truth was watching, waiting, and planning their next move. The question wasn't if they would reveal themselves, but when. And when they did, Sarah had a feeling that humanity's primitive innovations would once again prove far more valuable than anyone had expected. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's simple weapons. Now they were beginning to understand why that laughter had been their first mistake. But as Sarah and Roberts headed to their next briefing, they both knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would challenge everything the council thought they knew about the true nature of innovation and progress. The ancient revolver had opened their eyes. What they did with that newfound vision would determine the future of human-alien relations for generations to come.